Mr. Greer,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Griffin. All in favor?
Aye.
And it passes. We will be voting this evening on ordinance number 66, 2020, titled Disposal of Vehicles. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? Okay. As far as miscellaneous discussions go, if you are on the safety committee, you might see that there was one nuisance letter that was sent out on June 11th to 236 3rd Street Northwest. So I like to see that one, I may start following up with those. Also, I received, and I don't know if someone, what's that here? Oh, great. I received an email yesterday or Friday from, I just took a picture of it so that I can find it. From Representative Golansky's legislative aide. And she had a gentleman reach out to their office, expressing the need for a speed limit and or children at play sign on Oakwood Street.
I spoke to the gentleman on Oakwood Street, Dan Murphy, I think is his name.
She did not send his name,
Mhm.
but she said that he told her that he reached out to the city and they told him that it was a state issue.
No, what I told him was that that's sort of true. So the no children at play sign is discouraged and not used, should not be used, based on a study that was done that the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which we adopted as a city, by city ordinance a few, probably 10 or so years ago. And they discourage the use of children at play signs for various reasons. One is sign fatigue. The other is that parents tend to rely on that sign as the, and I don't mean this in any negative way, I don't know how else to put it, but as a babysitter. And when in actuality, the parents are the ones responsible for young children in the street or playing in their front yards. So I did explain that to him. He said that he had a son that's the same person, and that the son was, I want to say intellectually disabled. And again, the same kind of thought process goes into it. If the child were of age 12 or above, and 12 I'm using as an arbitrary number, I don't know if it's 12, 13, 14, where they would normally be outside playing kickball on their own, then we would put a sign out if the child was deaf, a deaf child. But again, if the child was younger than reason, so I guess it would be like under 8, then we would not put a sign out because it is the parent's responsibility. A speed limit sign is also generally under the jurisdiction of the state. Generally, residential streets are 25, and drivers know it or should know it once they get their driver's license and have been through the testing. So for those reasons, they were denied the children at play sign, and alerting the people to a disabled child at play sign, because his child, I believe, was 7 years old. Again, if we're talking about the same person. And this is also posted on the city's website under the safety page of the website. And it explains about the study that was done, about how it's in our ordinances, that we have adopted the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And that's the reason for my answer to this gentleman. And it was a very nice conversation. He said he understood. And I don't blame him if he got to go to a higher power to see if something could be done, but that is our position as a city and has been for several years.
Okay, so she just alluded to, that the fact that Oakwood isn't a state road, so it would be the city, she believed it would be under the city's jurisdiction to provide a speed limit sign. And I think she said, am I correct on that? So,
Yeah, I can't answer that. I believe that all speed limit signs, I wish Ron Gable were here because he could answer this better than I can. But the speed limits for residential areas are generally, as far as I know, in my 30-some years, are set by the state. It's residential's 25. And I think, again, a speed limit sign could go in, I suppose, if it is the city's responsibility. But I think it's common knowledge, and it should be for all drivers, that a residential street is 25 miles per hour. I also sent the same request to Chief Morber and asked for patrols. He had also received the same complaint, and they had already been up on that street that day that person called me, right?
Yeah.
And I asked that Oak would be put on the radar trailer list of places for them to set up on. And he said he would do that, and I'm sure he will, in order of priority or in order of request. So all of those things were already done with respect to that person's complaint.
So I guess the aide, Representative Polanski's aide was just wondering, whose responsibility it would be for the, for maybe a speed limit sign, and, just that, the gentleman was particularly concerned because of the construction that Oakwood has turned into kind of a cut.
Right, and so the speed limit sign is one thing, and the check and patrols as able to do so is another. And I don't know that a speed limit sign is going to stop anyone or reduce the speed, because we already know that it's 25 miles per hour. I think the more important piece of my advice to him was my willingness to get a hold of the chief and ask for patrols as necessary and as they can throughout their routine patrol. And I'm confident that they will do that.
We were up there this afternoon.
I'm sorry?
We were up there this afternoon.
I just wanted to be able to respond to
I understand.
her so that they can send the proper response as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any miscellaneous discussion? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Greer. We are adjourned at 6:10.
Next up is Mr. Greer with street sidewalks and lighting. All right. I'd like to bring to order street, sidewalk, and lighting. Today is June 22nd, 2020. It is 6:11 p.m. and at the Active Adult Center. All members are present, and all other council members are present and guests noted. Topics of discussion: we have no request for legislation. And miscellaneous discussion. The gas line project on Lincoln near 5th Street, 619, looks like it's complete. The next phase, I believe, is going to be the sewer construction. Mr. Tracy, the service director, could you shed some light on where that project is as a whole?
Which project?
The gas line project.
Gas line?
Lincoln 619. Okay.
The gas line project is not complete yet. What they've done is they did all the main gas line installations, and they had another job to go to, so they should be back this week to start installing services on that project. Once all the gas services are complete, we're looking at a potential timeline of mid to late August for the commencement of the stormwater installation project. And that'll be on Lincoln and 5th Street up to Houston, and the first block of Houston are the limits of the stormwater project.
And we're still on schedule for the resurfacing.
So as long as we can get the stormwater project in on 5th Street, on the 5th Street portion of it, so if we have to start there to try to get the 5th Street portion done so that we can pay, we should be able to make that schedule.
Awesome, thank you. I have nothing else. Is there any discussion from committee members?
I brought some figures today for everyone, just to kind of give you an idea where we're at, and what the department's been doing. Even through COVID, everyone stayed extremely busy. Just for reference, to this date, we read hot box loads at 4-ton loads. This costs about $22,000. This is areas that we've done, we're combing through streets and also responding to ticket complaints. And along with that, we've done 50 tons of cold mix asphalt, which that was primarily more in the winter, which in itself is about $5,800. So total for the year so far, we've used about $27,750 of materials on the streets. As far as street sweeping goes, we've swept 351 streets this year thus far. We've cleaned inlet tops in 795 streets. Now there's not that many streets in the city. That just means they've been on that many streets. They may have touched one street 3 times, but usually they can do 30 to 40 streets in a single shift when we do inlet tops, and we've done that at 10 different instances throughout the year. Typically, we do that as we watch the weather, and if there's a rain event coming, we'll make sure that we clean the inlet tops. The street sweeper schedule is typically in the middle of the night from 11:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. Those are on certain days. That information can be found on the city website, or you can call the mayor's office and we can get you that information. And what they typically do is we'll get complaints during the day for street sweepings, and we do some day sweeping, so we can do some specific areas at the request during the day. I just want to give everyone a heads up of where we're at in that department. They are also, it's that time of year where we're mowing a lot. Grass is growing well, it's starting to get warm, so maybe it'll slow down. But as far as the building list goes that come out of the building department, we've mowed 166 different properties out of the building department. City lots and land banks, there's 123 lots. We've been through all those at least one time. And we've been through all the parks, including the complex and all other parks, all green spaces throughout the city, a total of 8 times throughout the growing season this year. Just to kind of put it in perspective of all the things that they're doing in that department, it's just some interesting facts.
Well, I appreciate the info. It sheds light and lets people know that we are doing something. Is there anything else? Oh, Ms. Angela?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tracy, 9th Street, I know that's a residential street, but it has curbs now and has those huge catch basins. And I walk up and down that a lot. Is there any way that could be swept to get the debris away from some of those huge grates in the street?
Sure, it should be, it's on the sweeping list now.
Oh, it is on now?
Yeah,
I
so
didn't notice it. Thank you.
It may just been the debris buildup after you swept.
Okay.
But it's on the map. If you go online, it's on there.
Oh,
It's been placed on the list. So.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll make sure I reference it to them.
Is there any other topics of discussion at the gallery? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mrs. Angela,
And I'll second that motion.
seconded by Mrs. Fry. And street, sidewalk, and lighting is adjourned at 6:16.
Next up is Mr. Griffin, Rules, Marketing, and Development.
Rules, Marketing, and Development today is June 22nd, 2020. We are meeting in the Active Adult Center. All members are present and all those noted just on my sheet. Tonight, we have no request for legislation. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion for rules? Hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick.
I'll second it, sir.
Thank you, John. We are adjourned at 6:18.
Next up is Mr. Jaber with Environmental Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services meeting today at the Active Adult Center.
Time is 6:18, June 22nd, 2020. All members present, and others noted. Topics of discussion, there is none. No requests. Opening up for miscellaneous discussion. Seeing, oh, I'm sorry.
I just had a last minute question, thank you, Chair. Do we have any idea, as COVID cases begin to increase again in states, when a lot of, people in Ohio are traveling and returning, do we have a testing location within our city limits now for COVID?
Mr. Mayor?
There is some testing at Suma Hospital, but that's mostly for patients that come in. It's not open to the general public. The closest one associated with, well, any type of testing site, you need a doctor's order. So the closest one to us, I believe it's Rite Aid out on Green Portage Lakes area out on South Main. CVS,
I think that one's closed, I just went past it this weekend.
okay,
There weren't any tents up or anything.
okay.
I guess I'm concerned because today there were 740 new cases in Ohio that had doubled in, since the last several weeks.
Yeah, we've
And I'm just
been,
concerned that we are gonna have people are traveling and they're returning back to our community. And, that's where they're seeing outbreaks in other states is people that, they are being traced back to the beach, unfortunately, so.
yeah, anyone that travels outside of the state and comes back still is supposed to adhere to all the state's orders. We have been in conversations with Suma Hospital, UH, Summit County Health Department, Summit County EMA, and Access Point, and others on testing sites and getting those testing sites here in Barberton. It's my understanding that there's still a shortage of testing kits. We will have an update tomorrow by Summit County Health and the executive, so maybe more information.
Okay.
But I see our safety director and our chief of police raising their hand as well.
Okay.
I defer to the safety director.
As far as I know, the governor is not, he lifted the restrictions on travel, meaning that you didn't have to, 14-day quarantine, self-quarantine when you return from a hotspot. That has not been reinstated as far as I know. So you are free, citizens are free to travel as they choose. It would be the wise person that if they're coming back from a hotspot to self-quarantine for the 14 days, but it is not mandated by the state at this time. And CVS, they did open up theirs, and it's only select locations. I'm now checking on my phone to see if the one in Barberton is part of that location, but I don't think so.
I don't think they are.
Because they don't have the Minute Clinic inside, so I don't believe that one is involved in COVID testing. And I don't know that you need a doctor's order, Mayor. You may just qualify by age. Let's say if you're 65 or older, or if you are symptomatic, but I don't know that it's, I'll look that up and send everybody an email tomorrow. I don't believe you need the doctor's order, although it would be helpful and would probably get you with an appointment sooner. But if you meet certain criteria, I believe you can also get tested.
It was my understanding if you're in the high-risk category,
Yes.
they ask you to call your doctor, get a note to go. But, yeah, I don't think that there is a site at the CVS in Barberton.
No, there is not. I don't think there is either.
But like I said, we've been working with all the health providers in Barberton and actually throughout the county to try to get some testing in Barberton. Based on all the modeling that they've done, it would, based on our demographics that we would have, we should have the testing here in town.
I agree. Okay, thank you for the info. I just thought maybe you had more info than me.
Chief?
Reference testing, this weekend there'll be community testing, the House of the Lord, 11 to 1 and 3 to 5 both days, so if you want to go. But part of the problem is for public health, people do not want to get tested. They're not seeing a demand to be tested. So a lot of people are over it, whether it is or isn't, they are just over it. So that's part of the issue.
You said Saturday from 11 to 1, sir?
Yep, Saturday 11 to 1 and 3 to 5 both days. Summit County Public Health is a good resource for any community testing, and At Barberton, there are currently no cases, I do believe. No patients suspected or positive at Suma Barberton. Thank you. Feel free to travel about the country. Take Southwest.
Thanks, Chief.
Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, motion adjourned, please.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Mr. Griffin? All right, with that, I pass at 6:23.
Next up is Mrs. Anderloff with planning, annexations, and codes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning, Annexation, and Codes. Have our meeting tonight at 6:24 PM. All members of the committee are present, along with all council people and guests as noted on my sheet. Topics of discussion, we have a late piece of legislation. I would like a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 302. Do I have a motion for that suspension?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Greer, first.
I'll second that motion.
Second, Mrs. Coburn. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All in favor. This is a draft ordinance titled Formation of a Community Improvement Corporation, authorizing the formation of a Community Improvement Corporation for the city of Barberton and approving its articles of incorporation. There have been changes, this was submitted to us once before, and there have been changes. I've been working with the mayor, along with Mr. Heide on some of these changes, and hopefully everybody had seen and read the new changes, but I'll go over that very quickly. There's no changes in the article of incorporation. The changes are all in the code of regulations. And the first change is Article 3, Section 3. It's actually on page 4. It's adding education, down here where it says experience and whatnot, when you get down to law, it says education, social services, business ownership, healthcare, and/or significant cultural experience, and diversity and understanding of the city. That was added along with the last sentence that says, I have that right here, the last sentence that says, other complementary professions and skills associated with development and land use. The second change, which was a whole section that was added, it was Article 8, Section 11. And this is reporting to City Council, it's on page 10. Reporting to City Council not less than on a quarterly basis per the CIC will provide to Barberton City Council a report on activities and financials. From time to time, the mayor of the city of Barberton may also provide Barberton City Council updates as it relates to the city or community operations and activities. And Mayor, there is another change. It said adopted by 2018, that needs to be 2020. And that's on the Code of Regulations and the Article of Incorporation. You need to change that to 220.
Okay.
So if there's questions from the committee, they can go ahead and address those to the mayor at this time. Mr. Greer?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the changes are in bold.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee to the mayor? Did everybody had a chance to look at the old and look at the new? And no questions? Mayor, any comments?
No, I appreciate you working with me on this. I think I wanted to resubmit this because I think it's that important. So thank you, Councilwoman Angela, Councilman Heidi. Met with the attorney that's put this together has put together other CICs, Mr. Sugarman, and added the language. And as mentioned, what is the goal of the changes. And, pretty self-explanatory. I think that this gives us another major tool in our toolbox to increase the opportunity for economic development. So, if there's any questions that come up, please contact me, and I will be back in touch with you.
Anybody? Okay, Mrs. Bed?
Thank you, Mrs. Angela. I have a couple of comments, just some things that I would maybe like to see, and I don't know if anybody else is on board, but I really appreciate the changes that Mayor, they definitely, are great. But in section 2, under Article 3, for Board of Directors, the composition of the board, I personally would like to see more of an exact number set. Right now it says not fewer than 5 and not more than 15. So that's kind of a broad, a wide range. I don't know if that's a possibility, how any other council members feel about that.
Yeah, I was going to have Mr. Sherman come here and address council if there's any questions. I didn't, since I received none over the week. The reason that is not a definite number, let's say you fall short, someone resigns, then are you subject to, are you allowed to have meetings? If you're supposed to have 15, you only have 14. And maybe it takes a month or two to get a new member, are you allowed to meet during that period? So, and board members come and go for various reasons, so that's why the numbers are fast and heavy.
Yeah, the range is 10, so that's, I don't think you're gonna have 10, board members resign all at the same time, but that's just something, I don't know how other council members feel, that's something that caught my eye. And then, also under the, where it says one shall be a member of city council, I think that I would like to see that that's a specific committee, chair of a specific committee. I think finance would be a great addition. As of now, rules, the chair of rules already sits, on the BCDC, correct? On the BCDC board?
No. Yep, yes, you're a member of that board, I'm sorry, but yeah, you are a member of that board.
And then, planning is the other option, but the planning director is already listed on here as an ex officio advisor. So, I mean, I would just like to, and it's not up to me from which committee, but I would kind of like to see that specified, that way there's no gray area there. And then also, under the qualifications, I would also like to see that the appointed members do not sit on any other boards with functions similar to the CIC. So, I would like to see a more diverse group. So those are the things that I saw, and I apologize for not emailing them to you. I sat on it for a couple of days and kept looking back at it, so, that's all I have to share.
Thank you, Mrs. Bigg. Mr. Heidi, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Mrs. DeBevick on the board members' qualifications. Is there a way we can add that they are prohibited, so to speak, from serving on a different entity that serves in any function that the CIC would do, for instance, the BCDC Foundation, so that they couldn't sit on both simultaneously? Can that be added, or is that something that's?
As long as it doesn't,
Mr. Sherman was here, because I'm sure he could answer that one.
yeah, as long as it does, I would cautiously say, as long as it doesn't conflict with ORC, you can.
That's what
I just don't
get
know.
with that conflict, kind of, if somebody sat on the foundation and set up this, that there could eventually be a conflict, not a major one, but the goal I would take is to not have somebody stand up in the CIC and say, because I sit here, I have to abstain from a vote. So if that could be fit in somewhere, that.
I just want to be careful of like the scope, because we have people that live in Barberton that may want to be interested in this, but they sit on a similar type board in another community that work with developers that we may work with. So I don't know, the scope of how far to extend
Within the Barberton,
within
within the
Barberton.
Barberton realm. That way, like I said, that's, you don't have one person sitting on the CIC, BCDC, and they're also outgoing on the foundation. So basically limited within our own borders, that they can focus on our CIC and not have in the back of their mind how it would affect another thing that they're looking at.
Right,
But like for your example, if somebody was sitting on one from out of town in Fairlawn, I would see no problem with that.
And that was kind of the whole thing with previously, if you have people that sit on other boards and represent the schools and NAACP, BCDC, the foundation, that would really could exclude them from a lot of things. So, yeah.
That's,
And that was a really valid point there from that, I don't think that we caught it.
from my original outlay of people, with conversations with you, that doesn't make sense, so.
Yeah.
That's why, like I said, I like Mrs. DeBevick's idea of, I don't know if Barberton and prohibit, but within Barberton, serve them on the board of a different nature like that. If they're on a Salvation Army board, obviously that's not CIC grounds there, but since we have other tools, so to speak, they should, I would think that our board and the CIC should be focused on the CIC. If we could add that, I would be more than happy to see that. That's all I have, Chair.
Mrs. Colbert, you had your hand up.
My question was that by virtue of being the mayor and the planning director and a council person, some of those people are on 3 of those other boards that you just requested that other people not be on.
Point taken.
Very good point.
Mrs. Fry, you had your hand up, go ahead.
Yes, I was asking about you saying specifically that if people were from out of town and served on other boards, are you saying that you don't want, because it says up to 1/5 of the board can be made up of non-residents who have an interest in the city?
Oh, no.
Are you saying that they should not be a part of the CIC?
No, what I'm saying is that if they're on board in Copley, that would be okay, but if they're on the board of something within the realm, in the borders within Barberton, that should not be. That way they're focused on our CIC and not their other one. If they're focused, if they're on something else out of town, that's fine, but I wouldn't want somebody sitting on the foundation, so to speak, and the CIC. I wouldn't want somebody sitting on the BCDC and the CIC. I wouldn't want somebody sitting on SCS and the CIC. So just basically within the realm of Barberton, so you're either with the CIC in Barberton or you're with somebody else in Barberton.
Well, I'm gonna guess that the other scenario isn't very prominent because it does have to be someone who has a business in the city, correct? Right. So, I mean, the chances that they own a business here or, and that they're on another board, I mean, you might have 1 or 2, but I don't think it's not like you can make up your board of a bunch of numbers like that, so I don't think
Well, for instance, I'd see nothing wrong with, like, what the mayor said there is, if a developer is on a board in Berea, but has a business here, that shouldn't exclude him from Barberton. But if he was a developer on the BCDC, yeah, I could see a problem with that there.
I had another question that went with that, and it was, with these changes that you were suggesting, we're voting on this tonight, aren't we? Are we voting on this?
No,
We have
no,
legislation?
no,
No, okay,
Yes.
all right. That's what I was thinking, well, we make these amendments if we're going to vote for tonight.
But back to
Okay,
my,
yeah, you're just bringing it up.
yeah,
I'm
back
sorry.
to my question, how can we put that wording in here but still include those people that are on other boards as elected officials?
So as an elected official though, do you have a vote on that project? I wasn't positive.
Given what you stated there, then I would be fine with just a council member, not a defined one, because like you said, different seats there. But, yeah, I was sure when we see it, answer a few more of those for us there, but.
Well, I believe the planning director would be ex officio, so I don't believe you have a vote, the mayor and the council representative here. But depending on the mayor, depending on the council member, do sit on other boards.
Well, if it was the finance committee, they wouldn't sit on another, we don't sit on another board. So that would be, in my opinion, a good option to specify if we want to specify a council member by virtue of the chair of finance.
Mr. Greer?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say the conversation, I'm liking the conversation. I just wanted to kind of talk real quick, tap on a couple things I heard in the conversation. The quorum minimum is basically kind of what was mentioned, not indirectly, with the members, the 5 and 15. I agree with Mrs. Bevick that there should be more defined. That's a bit broad number. Usually it's also defined on a quorum of minimum people that you can have. Like, so just for example, one of the organizations, nonprofits that I sit on and the president of, we have 8 members. It requires us to have at least 4 to have a meeting. Right? So that, it does, I haven't seen it in here. I might have overlooked it in the articles of incorporation or the code of regulations for a quorum. Okay. So that would just dictate, usually the lower number is your quorum number. So it'd be at least 5 would need to be there to hold. But if you're having 15 positions, I do think that that's a lot of absent seats that could potentially have, I don't think there was negative effects if we have a lot of empty seats, but have a lower quorum. And if anybody has that quorum number, that'd be great.
It just says a majority of the number, so what's concerning to me is if it's a member of 5, if there only are 5 members, then.
Is it a majority of the 5 or is it a
people are
majority
making
of
a
the 15?
decision, right?
Right. So I think that could possibly, I'm gonna double back to it, and I'll reach out to you there and provide a little bit more details. On the seats for, that we're talking about the boards and not sitting on other places, and then some of the outsiders coming in and being on this, I just wanted to raise awareness that the committee is going to be dealing with trade secrets, not only with the companies that we try to get, but our own trade secrets. So if they do live outside of town, they have insider information on what is possibly being done here in town. They have what plans we have. And I just see that there is room for conflict, not saying that it would happen, but I think having outsiders with a vested interest, although it might be very slim, like Mrs. Bevick mentioned, it leaves the door open for things to leak outside of. I would imagine we want to work with our community, but we also don't want to give away stuff before we get to it. So that's just one of the things that, and usually if I can see cross-contamination and things leaking the other boards, if this is going to be its own entity, we should work with other organizations. And if somebody sits on, say, the foundation or BCDC, and then also sit on this, it's kind of like cross-contaminating and leave the room. I feel that it could leave the room for information leaking that shouldn't be leaking back and forth. So that was just a couple things just in the discussion. I did have some questions. I was sitting on them. I kind of wanted to see this today, and I'll shoot those over to the mayor this week. But
It also says that the members should be of high moral character. I do understand where you're coming from. There are presently people who sit on BCBC and the foundation. Those people have done an extremely great job of not crossing thoughts and make sure when they're in BCBC, they have the BCBC hat on. And then also seeing the other side and not fielding questions from the other side. And when they're at the other side, they got that hat on. So they do a very good job, but that's not going to be everyone. So I do understand your point. I think you're going to have that at times. But I think that the people that I've been around associated with these boards are really take it seriously. We haven't had that issue, but
That's right. Just when you said that, I think one thing that just kind of came to mind is definitely when, it's not so much trade secrets, but the funding. So how these things work is there, and just to kind of clarify something I said, maybe I used the wrong term, the conflicts, right, or competition. This will be in competition with funds. Like, we have another organization that applies for the same funds, and a lot of times they're non-competitive grants. One person gets it, not both. So you are putting competition. So if we do have somebody that sits on other boards and can say, hey, there's this grant opportunity that we don't know about on this board yet, but they know about it, they haven't applied for it yet, let's go for it, type of thing. So that's just kind of another concern I have. There's a lot of, it kind of goes back to, you're gonna have some of that, but that's just some of the concerns that I've seen, like opening it up across and allowing people from out of town and people from on boards, other organizations, I should say, not so much boards. And that's all I have.
Well, in that case, you only have competition if it's created. So if there's one source of funding, my anticipation is, my goal is that both boards would work together. Hey, you're gonna go after this, and we're gonna support you, and we're gonna take this piece of it. So if the funding is for land acquisition, then where do you go after land? If you get this, and you get the money, and you acquire the land, how can we help you in getting jobs on that land? So, the competition only is created if it's created by the two parties, one of the two parties. So that's not my goal, but, and some of the funding is, more than one entity can apply for the same funding. So funding is just kind of all over the board. So, I just know that there's a lot of money out there, there's new programs coming out, and I think that this would really benefit the city. Again, I spoke with Mr. Wagner at BCDC, I've spoken to the foundation, I've spoken to some other CDCs in the area, CICs, not CDCs. So, one put it through to the council again. So, I've got some notes here, I will run this by Mr. Sherman about adding this language, make sure it doesn't conflict with the ORC.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chair.
What you have to stop and realize that, competition is out there for everybody. Everybody wants to get that almighty dollar. So there is going to be competition out there. We just have to be smart and be able to use that. And if it is another organization in town, then we're hoping that the competition is for the city of Arlington. We all want to improve the city of Arlington.
We can fix that by blocking it and not worry about it.
So there is competition out there, because there's only so much money. But, thank you, Mayor. One more.
Just one place, name and question. Mayor, I would like to thank you for adding, we didn't talk much about it, but it meant a lot to me with section 11 with the quarterly reports.
Yes.
That would, I know we talk about seats and different things with that, but I don't want that to go missing, that was added for more transparency. I think when we talk about other communities, CSCs, I don't think they have this kind of transparency that really shows the city that we're serious and that we have nothing to hide. So I do appreciate that being added.
Another problem, I think transparency is kind of inherent in that, but it needs to be spelled out. That's fine.
This shows that the ORC requires something we went above. That's what I like to see there. So thank you for that.
Madam Chair, one of the problems that I see, I sit on, is I see the same people. And we pass each other going from one meeting to the other. Sometimes I'll make a comment. Why don't we just ride together? Because we're going, I know, Mrs. Kelly, sometimes her and I are just like, okay, well, we just ride together, we can save fuel. Because, you got the same people almost going to the same different places for the city that are interested in, I know I'm on some kind of land act and things come before Barberton. I have to abstain, and usually I know it before the legislation comes up or, the treasurer sometimes she tells me or whoever the chair is, I don't see a problem in it with myself, but maybe, you know, I don't know about everybody else. I can't speak with other people. I don't know if you could limit that. If you limit the chair or say, hey, you're gonna have shortages, I don't know what you would create. You know, it would be a negative effect.
Well, I think it has to be the interviews. I don't know how Mayor's gonna do that or how that's gonna be involved, if there's a committee or whatnot. This is a huge commitment. It's hard to find good volunteers there again. And I think this is so intense that the person, needs to understand, you know, what the hours are involved and what, you know, what you have to do. I sit on 3 separate boards, and there's work, you know, there's always work to do. Besides my Monday night meetings, I have 3 extra meetings, and, it's hard to find good volunteers that want to put the time and the patience and the reading and the meetings and all that, you know, involved. So, you know, Auburn is not very big, you know, and I know you get the same people over and over again. On one respect, oh, again, so-and-so again. But on the other hand, you have to say, thank you. You're retired. You want to do this. You want to make this commitment. So, I don't know if is there any names that we can, forward on to you for, members or boards? I don't know how that's being done.
If this passes, the plan is to definitely take input, feedback from council on members, and then submit resumes. Also put stuff out in the paper, and social media, and, like everything else that we've done, we're taking our time, we're doing it right, so.
I have given Mayor 3 or 4 names for the charter review that I have known in years, my whole life in town. You know, so that's something else that you can consider, you know, but this is gonna take somebody that has the time to sit and understand. And, sometimes it's the same person on a couple committees, but they're very valuable to the city, and they're here for one reason, for the city. So, any other questions, concerns, any questions to the mayor? No? I'd like this piece of legislation to not have emergency wording too. Do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, do I have a motion to, bring this out of committee?
We're gonna do the changes first.
Oh, okay.
I'm emailing Mr. Sherman now.
Are you?
I doubt we'll get in contact with you before the meeting's over, but, he's usually pretty quick.
And you were saying something about him coming in person and explaining the,
I was gonna have him tonight, but since I didn't receive any comment or questions from council, I told him this morning not to worry about it.
okay,
But, yeah, he was prepared to come, and he'd come July 13th.
6.
July 6th,
Let me, let's see.
July 6th?
Oh,
Did you guys get anything? This is spending.
yes, we did.
Yes,
I guess the reason that I didn't email the questions is I guess I assumed that we were gonna go 3 readings like we did the first time.
Well, we can't even go 3 readings because it's gonna be in August. So, you know, our last meeting is legislation, July 27th. Next time we meet, July 6th is committee of the whole. The next time is July 13th, that's legislation. July 20th, we can have 2 readings on this. If Mayor can get the changes, to us in enough time that we
I would
can,
assume by July 6th.
yeah, by
Sure,
July
we can have
6th. And please, anybody have any questions, please, let's get that to the mayor so we can get this, get these added and talk about it at the next committee of the whole meeting.
Are we doing 2 readings?
One or two at this rate.
Yeah, we can only, I mean,
Only
the most we
two.
can do is 2.
chair, sorry. Over here, Nina.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hyde.
If the sixth is legislative.
No, the sixth is
Sixth is whole.
committee of the whole.
Wouldn't that be legislative, is it committee of the whole after legislative night?
No, we're going back to
On the floor
every
meeting.
Monday. Is that right?
I thought,
July 13th would be legislation.
Right.
And July 27th would be legislation,
So committee of the whole would be on the sixth.
on the
So
6th.
for
If we could
a third reading,
read it,
we have to have a special meeting on August 3rd,
Right.
which if that would, I would have no problem with that, George.
Well, I'm going to say this. We need to get this done. I mean, one more reading, one more week. You know, get your questions into the mayor, and we'll have Attorney Sugarman, possibly if he's available to come July 6th and talk to us. And then that still gives us from July 6th to July 27th, and you have that weeks in between. So, you know, it's good that we're all talking about it, but I don't think 3 readings is necessary, considering we already had 3 readings on this, and now, you know, a piece of legislation is going on for 3 months.
especially if we make those changes. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what we want, right, are those changes?
Changes. Mhm.
So we've made progress, right? Everybody concurs that progress is,
Absolutely.
so
If the nuclear option happened and you needed a third reading on August 3rd, I'm just throwing out that I'd be willing. If the
Yeah,
changes,
and I
if the
mean-
changes go in, I'm
Right.
still comfortable with it.
And I've seen council in my years have 3 meetings in August, so there's really no recess to anybody in August.
And just on a side note, who knows what the governor will say anyway. so-
Exactly, and that
Yeah,
might be
we have to
something
meet.
that the mayor might have to do too, so, I don't have a problem with that, it's not like I'm traveling anyplace. I'm just
That's-
thinking 2 readings versus 3 readings, and we've already had 3 readings. I think everybody should get their questions in, and I know that Attorney Sugarman, and I'd like for everybody in council to put a face with a name and see how knowledgeable he is.
so we don't have to call for this tonight.
No, we won't call for it tonight. We'll wait till July 6th, right?
Right?
Is that right?
I just, wanted to add, and this is with all due respect, it's not about us, it's about the people getting it to them, which requires time. So, again, we're representatives, but it's not how much we've seen it, it's not how much the public's seen it, that's what the 3 readings are for, not us. But that's just me, so, but I'm perfectly fine with, since
Has anybody had the public? I mean, besides Mr.
Not
Mayor or
already.
something like that, I haven't had any, and it's in my committee. I haven't had any. Okay, going on, we have an appointment to the Design Review Board, Christina Drubel. I think everybody's received her extensive resume. Seems to be very knowledgeable and interested and eager to be on the board for Barberton. Anybody have any comment with her being added to the Design Review Board?
I know her personally, and I think she would be a really neutral and great asset to the community in this capacity. So.
Yeah, I know, I think her husband's director of the NBS. Yeah.
They actually live next door to me.
Yeah.
It's very,
So I sit on the Design Review Board, and that again is, it's a very good board. I really enjoy sitting, Mrs. Susan Wine has been on that board for 26, 27 years. She knows her stuff, and I think that, personally, I don't know Christina Drubel, if she stood in front of me, but just reading her resume and what I've heard from other people, she's more than qualified, and she's very eager to be on the board. So, any other comment? Mr. Greer?
Just like to add that, Mrs. Drubel has been invaluable when it's come to, some events here in town. They've taken them over. We've had organizations go to her for advice and to run it. And so I just want to, double down on that she's overly qualified and I would love to have her on the board finally to do something for the town.
Yeah, this is a good board. I can guarantee that. All right, any miscellaneous discussion with anybody from the committee, anybody from council? Any other questions? None? Okay, do you have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Greer, and second it, Mrs. Coburn. We are adjourned at 7:00.
Next up is Mrs. Coburn with City Utilities.
Okay, this is June 22nd, 2020, City Utilities. We are in the Active Adult Center. All members of the committee are present, along with others noted on my sheet. We have no request for legislation. We voted on the current legislation last week. Is there any miscellaneous discussion on Mr. Weaver? We have nothing going on. Anything from the floor about utilities? How about Beck's Ditch? Do we have any information on Beck's Ditch?
They're on schedule.
They, do we have a picture of the final, scheme of things for that?
And there's a set of plans, yeah.
Okay, because it said something about a bald cypress is going in the middle, and I just wondered.
I don't think that's in the plan.
Somebody was pulling someone's leg.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other discussion? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
We are adjourned at 7:03.
Okay, last but not least is Finance and Personnel, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight is, whoop.
Should just be fresh.
Yes, wasn't sure. Yeah. Let's see. Thank you, Mr. President. It is Monday, June 22nd, 2020, and we are going to start the meeting for the Finance and Personnel Committee. We are in the Active Adult Center. All members of the Finance and Personnel Committee are present, as well as all council people and guests as noted. Tonight, we have several requests for legislation. The first is a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Fire Department, appropriating $8,750 from the unappropriated item of the fire capital levy to the fire department capital budget. This was referred to finance from safety. This $8,750 is from the CARES Act for the purchase of a disinfecting system. And Mrs. Bevick, we purchased it ourselves and this is our reimbursement, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. So that is our first piece that we'll be voting on tonight. Then we have a couple of late requests for legislation. No, we're just getting it out of
Yes,
committee.
we need to vote.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just thanks, girl. Sorry. All right, do I have,
I'll make
a motion to call for this? Okay, motion made by Mrs. Bevick. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Second by Mrs. Angela. Okay, All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. All right, our second piece of legislation is a late request. And, we have to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401. The piece of legislation is a draft ordinance creating a new fund, titled Local Coronavirus Relief Fund. And this is going to authorize the Director of Finance to create a new fund, the Local Coronavirus Relief Fund. So do I have a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Angela, seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That also passes unanimously. Now, do you want to explain anything about this, Mr. Flecker?
Yeah, I can explain why, I'm requesting it to be voted on tonight. Basically, the state of Ohio received the CARES Act money from the federal government. One of the requirements in the CARES Act was the municipality or the governmental agency that's receiving the funds needs to create this fund, the Coronavirus Local Relief Fund. If you don't have this fund in place, you won't receive the funding from the state. I'm catching word that the state's first disbursement should be either this week or next week. So I could not wait for another legislative meeting, and I just found this out all last week, that I needed to get this fund created. So I need to get this, upon council approval, get this fund created so I can get it over to the county, because the county's gonna be administering the funds that the state's gonna be sending out. And the county has to have everything, to them, because if you don't have it to them within 7 days of the county receiving the money from the state, you miss out on the money. And I don't want the city to miss out on the potential money here. So that's why I'm requesting it to be voted upon tonight.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if it was possible for everyone to hear what Mr. Flaker said, but it is a requirement of the state to have a special fund for the local coronavirus relief fund for the money that is going to be distributed. And we have to have a number sent to the county so that they can distribute those funds. If we miss the deadline, we don't get the funds. Therefore, we'll be voting on this piece of legislation tonight. Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion that we call for this.
All right, motion made by Mrs. DeBevick,
I will second.
seconded by Mrs. Angela. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next piece of legislation is also a late request, and we will need to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401. This is for a draft resolution titled Coronavirus Relief Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, affirming that the funds from the county coronavirus relief distribution fund will be expended only to cover costs of the city of Barberton. Do I have a motion to suspend Rule 702? To invoke Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401?
I'll make the motion.
A motion made by Mrs. Angeloff,
I will second it.
seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, and this is also from you, Mr. Flaker, and I would assume it's just, that you have to attest to the fact that the things that you were paying are for actually the coronavirus.
Well, part, yes. The other part of it is, a few weeks ago, you guys passed a resolution to accept Senate Bill 301. Well, the state merged Senate Bill 301 into House Bill 481. So we need another resolution saying, basically attesting that we are gonna receive the money, we will spend it accordingly. And this is another piece of legislation that needs to go to the county along with the creation of the fund. So we have everything in place to receive the money from the state to the county, so,
So these go together?
yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I just want to clarify, just so we don't mess anything up. Mr. Laker, you said, Senate Bill 301, it says 3101 here. Is it, I just want to make sure we have the numbers correct, because I don't want it to be wrong.
It was Senate Bill 310, and I'm sorry, yeah, I was in.
I just wanted to double check,
It's Senate Bill
just because
310,
I don't want to have a
Yeah.
hiccup.
it was 310. Sorry,
Thanks for pointing that out, Carla. Okay, so it is Senate Bill 310. Does anybody else have any questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Devitt, seconded by Mrs. Angela. All in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, that passes unanimously as well. We do have two pieces of legislation that are currently on the agenda. The first is to authorize a payment to Lexipol, and that is, I believe, for the police department. And it's a program that they use, correct? Chief Morber, okay, and the second is a resolution titled Enter into Contract Insurance Coverage, Property, Vehicle, and Liability. We had, discussed this piece of legislation previously, and at the time of discussion, we did not have the amount of the renewal, but, Mr. Laker has, provided that, and it is $345,223. Do I have any questions concerning this piece of legislation?
Do we have to invite a committee to add this?
No,
No,
because Renee pointed it out that we never been
I number it.
and a number, and now we do, so we didn't have to make any changes, correct, Renee?
It's never been read.
Okay, never been.
Like Mr. Heidick's, will they have to be amended on the floor because it's been read before? Yours does not have to be amended because I've never read it.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if we had to amend it in committee.
You probably should.
That's what I thought.
I mean, it's not a bad idea to do it, but
Okay, all right.
it doesn't hurt.
All right, I will make a motion then to amend ordinance number 68-2020, to read that, let me see, an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a professional services contract with Whitegirt Insurance Company, constituting a one-year extension of the current contract in the amount of $345,223 for the city's property, vehicle, liability insurance coverage due to expire on June 29th, 2020, and declaring an emergency.
And I will second your motion to amend.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, and we don't have to vote on it, do we, because we already voted.
Well, if you just made a motion, so you guys have to do
Do I have to make
it.
a motion for that again? Okay, all right, I'll make a motion.
No, just all
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, does anyone have any miscellaneous discussion? And before you raise your hands, I have one piece of miscellaneous discussion. As you all know, we're gonna have to do something about the tax legislation, which we were working on in December and never went any further. And the mayor has reached out to all of us, asking us for, our recommendations going forward, how we can, raise revenue for the city. And we really need it badly. It's bad enough that me and Debbie left, but now we've had this COVID thing and several other issues. So if you haven't already, written to the mayor, giving him your recommendations for the tax legislation, please do so. And now I'm gonna open it up if anybody has any.
I just have a question, not necessarily, I emailed the mayor. Did it just go to you?
You
I
said-
replied.
So you must have.
Oh, I must not hit reply all, darn it.
You must have just hit my name, because I saw it.
You saw it? I thought I hit reply all. Well, I apologize. I'll send it to you. But I should have attached Mr. Flaker. Basically, I would like, do you think that the CIs, or that, it just went to you?
It only went to me.
Okay, I apologize. Do you think that, the CCA will have some better figures for us? Well, the figures that we're awaiting are from CCA because they were off. So we haven't had accurate actual figures, correct?
Correct. I'm still waiting on actuals. I do know, after we met last week, I want to say it was Tuesday or Wednesday, I received a letter from CCA, for the April collections. They gave us another advancement of $310,000 for the month of April. $276,000 will go into the income tax fund. The other roughly $35,000 will go into the street capital improvement fund. So they are working on the actuals because we got another advancement for the month of April. Are they 100% completely caught up? No, they are not. But they are making progress at getting caught up.
Let me just read what I emailed, but maybe you can add. I'm sorry, I thought that I had replied all, but I guess I didn't. I'm looking this in here. Do you have it pulled up, baby?
Yeah.
My phone's going to slow to pull it. Do you mind reading it for me? You can just be my voice.
You'll like it, a little deeper than yours, but that's all right.
Thank goodness.
This was supposed to be to you, Mr. Mayor, there, she just hit my name, but good afternoon, Mayor. I just wanted to touch base with you regarding the financial impact of the unprecedented events we have experienced in the last 4 months and how they will likely affect the 2021 budget. I would like to receive some of the actual numbers we have been missing from CCA as a result of the shutdown before making any decisions. This would give us better insight into a more accurate figure so we can articulate the exact need for our constituents. I understand that the Board of Elections requires all submissions for the November 2020 ballot at the beginning of August, but I do believe the initiative might be led with less resistance if we have numbers to back up the request. Sincerely, Carla DeBevick.
So basically, I would just thank you. I would just like to try to compile as much information as we can so that we can make a decision moving forward as to how we're gonna generate what we need, what's the best avenue, how is it gonna impact our residents the least amount. And because we haven't had accurates, I think that that's hard to do. But I know that there's a timeliness matter to it. So I just wanted to reach out to Jeremy also and, ask him if he had been receiving any, if he knows when he will have more actual.
Like Mr. Flaker said, the letter he received last week, Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, he wasn't expecting. So, not even a phone call. So when we talk about things and have talked, and Mr. Flaker talks to CCA more than I do, we've always said, we're gonna have more accurate information by September. Because the deadline for individual taxes was pushed back to July 15th. They're a month or so behind. That gives us, we're looking roughly around September. Past the deadline.
Right.
So we've got a few competing things, and we're always talking to our business community, were you shut down? How long will you shut down? Can you share your payroll information with us? And how does that affect us? And we're trying to run those scenarios and then BW on top. So a lot of competing things. I don't recall if the emails I did receive were to all or not, but they were all basically the same in terms of, let's do it for just a finite period of time. 3 or 4 years, I think, is the consensus. Different millage on property taxes. But for a certain period of time, that way we're not saying, hey, this is gonna be forever. So, yeah, I think all of council who has emailed me so far, is under the same kind of, concept. We may not know exactly what we need. What is being proposed may not get us what we need, but it's better than nothing, and let's go out and try. It's always tough during a presidential election. It's always tough when there's charter amendments on the ballot. So it's gonna be an uphill battle if we go to the voters. No one wants to pay more taxes, we all get that. So, yeah, I wish I had some more accurate information.
And I understand the time, and that's why I wanted to express that in the email.
And I just want to say again, I don't want to take up too much time, but this is why, Mr. Flanker and I want to go with Rita. So we'll start that January 1st. And I think there's like a 1 or 2 day lag period. So better analytics, better data, we can make better decisions in a more timely fashion. So
And I just think that those more accurate decisions make it easier to
Definitely,
explain it to the public.
definitely.
And I think that that's, especially during a financial crisis, really, from all avenues.
And when I talk to other communities, everyone's in the same boat. So when I talk to other communities, it's kind of up in the air on what they want to do, because not only, no one wants to go try to tax people more, but you're possibly, in most cases, taxing a citizen who may have been out of work, for a period of time, or still is. Compounds the problem even more. So there's a lot of competing interest and ideas and concepts. None of them are really that good.
I just wanted to ask you, Bill, if you know how many days ahead of time we have to have it to the Board of Elections. I had a call out to them because they're not all the same. Different ballot issues require a different amount of time, and they never got back to me yet, but.
Mr. Midge has asked me before council started, and I'd have to go back and check. I don't know what I want to say, but I just want to confirm. So.
It's either 60, 90, or 120 days.
Yeah, there you go, you get.
Well, and Mrs. Miller did make it pretty clear as far as she has to have time to review the ballot language, so, we can't give it to her the night before.
Yeah, we're gonna have
I
to.
think she confirms the ballot language with an outside source also, so it's not just her.
She's off for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I know she had surgery.
We are gonna have to tackle it from multiple ways, so we spread it out. And we even need to make some internal changes, I think, to try to raise revenues. Yeah, because, the good thing about Barberton is the taxes are low, but the bad thing about Barberton is they have a ton of services and we can't afford to do that anymore. We're gonna have to, if they would if people from Barberton talk to people from other communities, they would see, how great it is, compared to Akron or even Norton. The taxes there are outrageous. And, they get a lot for their money when they do pay their property taxes. So does anyone else have any comments or anything that you'd like to discuss? No? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Motion to adjourn made by Mrs. Angela,
I will second that.
seconded by Mrs. Levitt, and we are adjourned at 7:24, 23.
Okay, we'll go into the legislative meeting in 5 minutes.
I do, I think.
Oh, these are small, I see you, this thing.
You know, when I get the big ones, like the big brick pizzas, 4, 8, or whatever, I just crack it open and eat them like right apart. You just.
On the email, I can't believe I didn't reply all. Hopefully I can my emails
Well, if you replied now.
Yeah, you replied and I only needed to reply.
Replied to the first person.
Yeah, because I didn't reply all.
Yeah, I think if you replied with your info. Yeah.
I saw yours, I was like, okay, speaking. So you said something.
But it's okay.
Even if there's money to do more. Because you're putting.
I went to talk to her the other day.
They're in Chandler, they haven't done it yet, but their neighboring cities, Phoenix, Gilmore, now it's like that's outdoors is everywhere.
No, because of the fires.
They said we're gonna be, we're at mass, have a lot.
Yeah, and I have a big thing. Carl, I don't have one.
Maybe we take it out.
It's in Florida. It's going crazy right now, and,
It's a nice thing here, you
Well, we were supposed to go, it was my parents' wedding anniversary, when they graduated from school. We were gonna go for a week. She's school, 12 days after she graduated.
Yeah, let's.
She can't write for 3 years. So,
You and myself.
we were gonna go.
The four of us.
I don't know, right now, film on these,
We're gonna,
well, you'll know that, see, I think a lot of this, you know, these protests and all that kind of stuff, I think they are.
Oh, yeah. I saw actually, yeah.
And then you talk to people, there's an article in the paper. Yeah, it's scary.
sidewalk?
Yeah. There's not a lot to do. Ours was. No, the parties are. And it was hard. Yeah. They're already having,
Yeah.
Clemson's football program had 28 days.
Yeah, they don't have a neat guidelines.
I mean,
No, you're right.
I was so curious, I was at 3 days, oh, I have biology class, so.
Although.
It was 3 hours, it was on virus and bacteria. Important viruses, you know, in definitions, all the tests. Cavities, the these cats. Yeah. After it's really doing that, because,
Well, I have two family members.
Oh, okay, all right, all right. Yeah.
Well, they really, he doesn't have to.
Yes. I had asked
And more people want to.
Thursday, I might.
We're doing best in school than what we were.
because I know we haven't gone.
There's some days I see myself. I get off, say you go to the books and I take them stuff in my sales tax.
I'm gonna
It's
try.
like DoorDash, Uber, and other ways it goes. It's like, okay, I get it, I'm not paying taxes.
One of those things, so. I have to look at this.
Okay, we're gonna get started here in a minute.
And there's no built-in mechanism for it.
Hey, my neighbor down the street. Tell him yeah, so make sure that Joe knows that I appreciate it and that he appreciates too, okay?
I'll make a visit down there.
Okay, thanks.
Sure you will, I do.
Okay, this is a regular legislative meeting of the Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, June 22nd, 2020. It is now 7:32 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Mrs. DeBeck. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, as we gather today at this meeting, we ask that you be in our midst. Help us to make decisions that will be pleasing to you. Help us to be able to discuss the matters at hand in a reasonable way and to be willing to give up having our own way. As always, keep special watch over our first responders and military men and women that protect us each day. God, let this meeting be productive and, as should be the case in all areas of our lives, help us to keep you at the forefront of our minds as we do the work set before us. In your name we pray, amen.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Angela. Here. Mrs. Coburn.
Here.
Mrs. Levitt. Here. Mrs. Braun.
Here.
Mr. Greer.
Present.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mr. Hyde.
Here.
Mr. Taylor.
Here. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting. Mrs. DeBeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, June 8, 2020, as presented.
Thank you. And Mr. Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second the motion for the approval of the minutes.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Hyde to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, June 8th, 2020, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are adopted. Petitions and claims. Matters requested.
They then passed out.
Citizens addressing council.
I received them.
First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 66, 2020, presented by Mrs. DeBevick, titled Disposal of Vehicles, Police Department. An ordinance authorizing the police chief to scrap salvage 14 vehicles deemed to be no longer needed for any municipal purpose and unfit and unsafe for disposal in any other manner and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, and Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second the motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick, and second by Mr. Greer, to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Frye,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Stover.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 66, 2020.
Thank you. And Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second the motion for adoption of ordinance number 66, 2020.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick, and second by Mr. Greer, to adopt ordinance number 66, 2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela. Yes. Mrs. Frye,
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Ordinance number 67, 2020, presented by Mrs. Frye, titled Authorizing Lexical. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay an invoice to Lexical in the amount of $8,922 and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Frye.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Frye, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Frye,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Frye.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 67, 2020.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Frye, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to adopt ordinance number 67, 2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mrs. Frye,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Ordinance number 68, 2020, presented by Mrs. Frye, titled Enter into Contract Insurance Coverage, Property Vehicle Liability. And I should say that this was amended in, Finance Committee to add the amount. An ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a professional services contract with Woodruff Insurance Company, constituting a one-year extension of the current contract in the amount of $345,223 for the city's property vehicle liability insurance coverage due to expire on June 29, 2020, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Frye.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
A motion was made by Mrs. Frye, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's actually for Mr. Claiborne. I meant to ask this during, committee. So what did we end up with as far as coverage for our DM?
It's not included under the 10 million umbrella. They were able to get $1 million of general liability coverage on it. They went out to 10 or 15 different insurance agencies. Not all of them declined, except for Travelers, which they were willing to give us the 1 million under general liability coverage. So,
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Are there any other remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heide?
Yes.
Mr. Shaver?
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 68-2020.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to adopt ordinance number 68, 2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Shaver?
Yes.
Mr. Heide?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela? Yes. Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Ordinance, the Finance Committee vote Council Rules 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401 to add the following ordinance to tonight's agenda. Ordinance number 69, 2020, presented by Mrs. Fry, titled Create New Fund, Local Coronavirus Relief Fund. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to create a new fund, the Local Coronavirus Relief Fund, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heide?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Shaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 69, 2020.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to adopt ordinance number 69, 2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Shaver?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heide?
Yes.
Okay, again, the Finance Committee invoked Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401 to add the following to tonight's agenda. Resolution number 70, 2020, presented by Mrs. Fry, titled Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. A resolution passed by the City of Barberton, Ohio, confirming that funds from the County Coronavirus Relief Distribution Fund will be expended only to cover costs of the City of Barberton, Ohio, consistent with the requirements of section 5001 of the CARES Act as described in 42 USC 801D and any applicable regulations as is necessary pursuant to House Bill 481 before receiving such funds and declaring emergencies.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. The motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mr. Heide?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Shaver?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution number 70-2020.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt resolution number 70, 2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mr. Shaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heide?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
and first reading.
Second readings of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number, okay, following ordinance was amended in the city property parks and recreation committee to read as follows. Ordinance number 63/2020 presented by Mr. Height, titled Memorandum of Understanding. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a memorandum of understanding between the city of Arlington, Healthcare Ministries, Inc., and the city of Norton, and declared an emergency.
Motion to amend, Mr. Height.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we amend ordinance 63/2020 to add emergency language.
And Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second amendment.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Heidick and second by Mr. Jaber to amend ordinance number 63/2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on amendment.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Silver?
Yes.
Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mr. Height?
Yes.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, and Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll take a second.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Heidick, second by Mr. Jaber, to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. After conferring with Director Miller and Mayor Judge and the committee, Christian Healthcare Ministries acted in good faith and what they want to do with the cemetery. And we have agreed to suspend and forego the third reading so that they can work on this project right away.
Thank you. Are there any other remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Height?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Silver?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adopt ordinance 63/2020.
And Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll take a second. Mr. Heidick's motion for adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Heidick and second by Mr. Jaber to adopt ordinance number 63/2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Bennett?
Yes.
Mrs. Silver?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Height?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
And the second readings.
Third readings of ordinances and resolutions.
There are none.
Appointments.
I have one, it's for the Design Review Board, Christina Drubel, effective immediately through December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. Approval to appoint, Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call for motion to approve Christina Drubel to the Design Review Board starting immediately and ending on December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Angela's motion to appoint.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Angela and second by Mrs. Coburn to appoint Christina Drubel to the Design Review Board effective immediately through December 31st, 2021. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mrs. Gruber is appointed. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
I have nothing.
Do you have anything, Mayor?
Yeah, a few updates here.
Go ahead.
A few updates. You may have read last week, there was a meeting in Thetford Park, put on by Mr. Willie Jenkins to discuss the community, race relations. So there's a lot going on, not only throughout the country, but throughout the world. It was a great meeting, a lot of fine points associated with the police, community, relations, our schools, a lot of good questions, and just the Barberton community in general. I believe Mr. Jenkins is gonna have another meeting here, August, September time frame. So he'll get back in touch with me and I'll pass it along. We're continuing, things are starting to get back to somewhat normal. You heard Mr. Tracy talk about some of the construction projects. They're underway. Continuing to meet the businesses, doing our DRPs. here in town, prospective businesses looking to move into town. As mentioned, the Fifth Street Stormwater Inlet Project, Foundation Field Detention and Expansion projects are moving forward. We continue to try to dry out Red Park in order to move that project along. This weekend's rain didn't help that situation, but still trying. Federal funds, you may have seen in the paper, have been allocated for the floodplain management studies through the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's from Portage Lakes all the way to now. So obviously, Ghost Rewatering affects us, affects Copley, North, Coventry, all the way down to California. And this is one of the first major steps towards stormwater mitigation and really solving the problem. Myself, Rosita North, and Copley Township, we worked years ago on the mitigation plan. But this is bigger than any one community. So we've talked to the Army Corps of Engineers in the past. So there's some federal funds, about $390,000 that has been allocated for this project. And it may seem silly that we've got to spend money where money's being spent to tell you that it works. But it tells you along the river where the runoff is and what does the floodplain look like in the Portage Lakes area, how does that change once it gets to Garvin, and how does that change once it gets to Franklin and then down Fulton. You need to do those studies when you've got some rain gauges being installed as well. And precipitation gauges, you need to collect that data so you can go to the next step. So I'm very excited about that. This is not an easy fix. This is not a cheap or inexpensive fix. This is something that's going to take the federal government to step in. This is something that's going to take a lot of people. So we're still meeting internally. We're still meeting with countywide and then region-wide with the governor's task force on this. And then this is federal funds. There's still a lot going on addressing stormwater mitigation here in the city. So whether it's federally, state, or projects here internally to the city. So, moving in a good fashion in those terms. I've met with, or will be meeting with reps from Team Mayo, also with Jobs Ohio, also working with those groups in the county with job hubs, so we'll have some updates there. Also been working with the Fund for Our Economic Future, so just a lot of information and a lot of meetings on that front, try to spur development here in town. COVID is not gone. So a lot of things associated with COVID, we have some updates in conference calls tomorrow. Conference call internally, then with some county executive, Ivy Shapiro, some county health department, some county EMA. So as well with the state and the White House actually, for the federal call this week. The rules and guidelines are always changing. You heard Mr. Blaker say there's a 7-day time frame to get legislation passed and things established. So they create guidelines and rules, and we put a very short window of opportunity there. So I appreciate everyone voting tonight on that legislation. Locally here, the COVID business stimulus program phase 2 is underway. We've got about $200,000 allocated for small businesses. The problem is you meet the criteria. So the problem is if you receive funding previously, the PPP or some other stimulus through the county, you are not eligible for this funding. So we want to get the word out. We want to be able to use that money to help businesses. But a lot of businesses have already taken part of federal funding through the COVID stimulus programs. They're not eligible for this. So if you know of any businesses, please point them to our way. That's being run through the planning department. So I want to thank Mr. Hunt and his team for all their work on this. A lot goes into this. A lot of reporting beforehand, a lot of reporting afterwards as well. So. And then just for the record, there's 2 pieces of proposed legislation I believe on one we've gone for committee of the whole for this meeting. I will be leaving after this meeting, waiting for a phone call on a prospective business that is looking at a facility in town. I want to check on that. I also want to check on some federal grants that we applied for, so I can see if there's any work back on that. So just to let everyone know I will be leaving after this legislation. All right.
Thank you. Anything else from the good of the body? Okay, I have a couple things here. Next Monday is the 5th Monday, so we will not be meeting. Next meeting will be Monday, July 6th, and we'll return to our normal schedule, but we'll be here at the Active Adult Center. There'll be a committee of the whole meeting. And Friday, July 3rd, the city building will be closed, in observance of the 4th of July. And I know you've all been waiting, but the yard sale is back. Okay, it is August 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, and you wouldn't believe how many people have called me about that. So, there it is. 6, yeah, we have flyers here, it's going around town, but I'm sure you've all been asked, so. It is on the first full weekend of August. Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Regis. I want to thank everybody for the annual campaign, YMCA. We made our goal for this year. For the second year in a row, I was the chair of the finance committee. So our goal was $27,000. I didn't think we were going to make it, but we did make our place goal for this year, even with the COVID. And I made my rounds in a municipal building a couple of weeks ago, and I come out with $240 and some more pledges. So I'm real thankful for everybody in town, the government that gave money. And if you really feel like you left out, it goes on all year, you still can make a pledge to make. Thank you.
Anyone else?
President?
Yep.
Just got an email, Situan's asking if you have a graduation party. Is there any rules or regulations against people doing a graduation party?
I have no idea on that.
Anybody know?
We recommend anyone that's having a graduation party or birthday party, check the Summit County Health Department's website on all the guidelines and the rules, and also best practices. So that's something that, the health departments have been very, very strict on. So they're the ones that take up the enforcement, but they can also enlist the police department if need be. Just tell them to check out the website, Summit County Health Department, they've got a whole designated website.
Thank you.
And it changes all the time. So, anybody else?
Mr. President,
Yes.
just as a matter of reference, the Ohio Department of Health does have some guidelines for garage sales, just some recommendations for individuals having garage sales.
Okay. Where did you get that out of?
It's on the Ohio Department of Health website.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Do they know what's gonna happen for July? Do they know when he's gonna come out with the new requirements for July? Because a lot of stuff is to the end of June.
Most things opened up, I think the last date that I saw was June 19th. I'm not sure if any dates he's about.
Like the 10-person minimum and stuff like that.
Go ahead.
I don't know how much it applies to other things, but I do know the restaurant orders and all that expired July 2nd, so I don't know if those 10 persons expired at the same time, if not extended by the director of health. The current orders, I do know go through July 2nd.
Okay. Anyone else? If nothing else, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Mrs. DeBeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you, and Mr. Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. President, I'll second the motion to adjourn.
It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and seconded by Mr. Hyde that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 8 o'clock. Take 5 minutes. And we'll go into the committee of the whole.
I tried to keep up with it. Yeah, I just have black down there. Yeah. Well, that's like.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have to. They're in person.
That's why I want you.
I don't want it.
It's the last thing before you
We used to have our.
Yeah, right, you cut the last.
All those at least have another and then I did
Hopefully it all was one. That was used, that stretch of road. Other stuff that was there, I mean, that stuff was kind of. Okay, granted, there's that one. And then it was just come out, you fill it, and it would just break.
I won't. And it'll be up Friday, Thursday and Friday.
We got everything.
I don't think they come right on us to the road.
And the water just goes down.
Well, they're gonna go to Snake, and they're gonna go down that little bypass.
Well, they don't wanna pay anything about the thing else.
I think she has.
And I go down there, yeah, and no cell phone.
And it is deeper.
Volume 4, maybe one.
And
Like, actually drive. Yeah. Actually drive.
it has all the. Well.
So we ended up. And they started going back. They said,
Well, there's a big sign there was.
yeah.
No,
We put that out after.
it was a freeway sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they can't be big enough.
Yeah. But anyway, that other information is good.
Before all this. It's 200.
Just across the board, I was getting phone calls.
Yeah.
It works.
It works. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
And then, got married that day. So I've done that so many times. People like come home from work, they'll call me on the I'll be like, "Is that weird?" And then they do
All right, come on, we're ready to get started. You guys are easy to curve.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the committee of the whole meeting, Monday, June 22nd, 2020. I call this meeting to order at 8:07. We've already done the pledge of allegiance, so we'll go right into committee reports, and we will start off with Mrs. Angela with planning, annexation, and code.
Now, I wish my last name didn't start with an A. Thank you, Mr. President. Planning, Annexation, and Codes met this evening here at the Active Adult Center. All my members were present for the committee, all council was present, and others as noted on my sheet. We had a late request, a legislation request. We had to, we invoked Rule 702 to suspend Rule 302. It's the formation of the Community Improvement Corporation. And there were changes that was made. Nothing was changed on the Articles of Incorporation, but there was changes made on the Code of Regulations that everybody got the new one, all the changes on there. There was questions from members saying that 5 to 15 members, it's a broad number, maybe we can shorten that number somewhat. There was conversation about council, there's a council representative, and who may that be? And trade secrets, having different people on that committee, that sit on other committees. So the mayor is going to be working with Attorney Sugarman with these changes, and, July 6th, that will be called on, if those changes are agreeable. And hopefully Attorney Sugarman will be here to be able to answer, any questions. We had an appointment to the Design Review Board, Christina Drubel, immediately through December 31st, 2021, and no miscellaneous. And with that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Greer with Street, Sidewalk, and Light.
Thank you, Mr. President. Street, Sidewalk, and Lighting met today, June 22nd, 2020, at 6:11 p.m. at the Active Adult Center. All members were present, and all other council members were present and guests noted. We had no request for legislation and miscellaneous discussion. Mr. Tracy gave us an update on the Lincoln, the gas line, sewer line, and road project. The gas line is not completed, but the entire sewer project is expected to be completed in mid-August. Mr. Tracy also gave us some numbers, and if I missed some, he's going to be sending me a list of all the other stuff that he did. But he provided information on what we've been doing with the street department. 292 tons of hot mix have been placed, 50 tons of cold mix have been placed, and that has come out to roughly $27,000 approximately. 251 streets have been swept since the program started this year. And if anybody needs information on when the street sweeping schedule and what roads they do, it can be found on the website. He also mentioned that 166 properties have been mowed, and the workers out have made their rounds 8 times since the season started for mowing and taking care of the parks. With that, we had nothing else, and Street, Sidewalk, and Lighting adjourned at 6:16 p.m. And with that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Next up is Mrs. Coburn with City Utility.
Thank you, Mr. President. City utilities met this evening, June 22nd, 2020, in the Active Adult Center. All members were present and guests as noted. We had no request for legislation and no miscellaneous discussion. We adjourned at 7:03. With that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Public welfare and safety, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Public welfare and safety met this evening here in the Active Adult Center. All members of the committee were present, as well as all other council members, and all others noted. We had one request for legislation, is the draft ordinance titled appropriation, fire department, appropriating $8,750 from the unappropriated item of the fire capital levy to the fire department capital budget. This was referred to finance. This is for some equipment that was purchased for COVID, and it's a reimbursement from the CARES Act. We voted on a piece of legislation this evening that passed for the disposal of vehicles. We also had some miscellaneous discussion. I had received an email regarding speeding and some safety issues on Oakwood as a result of the 76 construction. And Mrs. Doherty and Mr. Morber weighed in and had spoken with this gentleman. I will get back with our state representative's aide and let her know where we're at with that. And with that, public welfare and safety will pass.
Thank you very much. Next up is rural marketing development, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules Marketing and Development met tonight, June 22nd, in the Active Adult Center. All members present and guests as noted. Tonight, we have no request for legislation. And we also didn't have any remarks or miscellaneous discussion. A motion was made to adjourn, and we adjourned at 6:18. With that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Environmental Health and Social Services, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services met at 6:18 in the Adult Center, June 22nd, 2020. No request for legislation, miscellaneous discussions. Mrs. DeBevick asked for testing for COVID-19, and Suma Hospital has that available, and also House of Lords this Saturday from 11 to 1 and 3 to 5. And no other discussions were brought up, and with that I pass, and we adjourn at 6:23, sir.
Thank you. City Properties, Parks and Recreation, Mr. Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties, Parks and Recreation met this evening. Leading off as always, June 22nd in the Active Adult Center. All members were present. Guests noted. We had no new legislation. The legislation that we passed tonight, 63-2020, was amended on the floor to include emergency language. That way the Christian Healthcare Ministries could get to work on the Portage Cemetery as quickly as possible. For miscellaneous discussion, we handed out 1,100 lunches between the 5 parks this morning, 225 magic boxes with the activities. The playgrounds are now open, and the rooms are up at all the parks except for McCafferty, where we're waiting to resurface that, and they'll be up shortly after that. And with that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Finance Personnel, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Personnel Committee met tonight at 7:03 in the Active Adult Center. All members of the committee were present, as well as all council people and guests as noted. We had several requests for legislation. The first was a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Fire Department. This was to appropriate $8,750 from the unappropriated item of the fire capital levy to the fire department capital budget, and was referred to us from safety. This money was paid by the fire department, and this is a reimbursement from the CARES Act, and it was for the purchase of a disinfecting system. We had two pieces of late legislation, two pieces, late requests for two pieces of legislation. The first, and we had to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401 for these two pieces of legislation. The first was a draft ordinance titled Create New Fund, Local Coronavirus Relief Fund, authorizing the Director of Finance. This fund needed to be created so that we can receive the disbursement that we will be getting from Summit County. We had to pass this on an emergency basis because of the fact that the first disbursement will be this week or next week, and we have to have a number for the fund to the county so that they can distribute our portion of the coronavirus relief funds. The second piece of legislation, which was a late request, was a draft resolution titled Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. This, for this piece of legislation, we also had to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rules 302 and 401. This was a draft resolution to affirm that the funds from the county coronavirus relief distribution fund will be expended only to cover costs of the city of Barberton related to the COVID-19. We had two pieces of legislation currently on the agenda. The first was to authorize payment to Lexipol, which was for the police department, and I think that was $8,922. I have that somewhere here. And yes, $8,922. Then the second was a resolution number 68/2020, titled Enter into Contract Insurance Coverage, Property, Vehicle, and Liability. We had to make a motion to amend the resolution because of the fact that we did not have the amount of the premium when we first introduced this piece of legislation. And that amount is $345,223. And this is an increase of $764 from last year. Mrs. Bevick asked a question about the dam, which we discussed the last time that we were discussing this legislation, and they were not going to cover it. However, we did, they did find someone to cover it, and it will be Travelers. It will only be covered for $1 million for general liability. And under miscellaneous discussion, I announced the council should get their recommendations to the mayor regarding the tax legislation, because this has to be discussed and passed and gotten to Mrs. Miller in a timely fashion, and we have to have it to the Board of Elections. Someone asked Mr. Flaker about the actuals and whether or not we had gotten them yet from CCA. That was Mrs. Bevick. And we have not gotten actuals. However, we did get a distribution from CCA, and they are making progress as to getting the actual amounts that the city did collect. And with that, finance will pass.
Thank you very much. Anything else from anybody here? Nothing. This meeting is adjourned at 8:19.
So I don't know what happened. Yeah, people doesn't enjoy it.
I did too.
One on the lake.
All of us thinking.
Yeah, that was too insane.
I know, there's a whole business on it.
Two meetings.
I'm so glad.
It's planning.
It's hard. They have to, especially the changes on. Oh, yeah. Well, and that happened, so we have two.
There was a breakdown.
But we've been.
She went to the shop to get, to buy something.
All right, man. Hey, sir, how you doing? How you doing? Yeah, I was